So, for as many videos as I've done covering this topic, I think it's always good to sort of do refresher courses on things like this. And I'm referring to all the questions I get about how I mix my guitars. How I mix songs in general, I still get a ton of questions on, but how I'm mixing my guitars and what I'm doing is probably the #1 thing people ask me. So in the interest of being as helpful as possible, we're going to go over this again. We're going to take a look at my track Humanity, that was the last track I put out last year, end of December 2020. It's a very dense mix. There are a lot of guitar layers. There are a lot of things happening with the guitars. So I think this will be a good example of what I do in a dense mix, a dense guitar heavy mix. Now there are some things I don't typically do in my tracks, in this particular track. Now, what do I mean? This track is very Devin Townsend inspired, and there is a lot of delay and reverb on the heavy guitars, something I don't typically do with my music. But I was inspired by a tone I created, and then I wrote this song. It wasn't that simple, and it wasn't that fast, but the process, or the first domino falling of me writing this track was inspired by a tone I created. So long story short, it's a heavy guitar tone with delay and reverb. So now while this video might be long, I figure I'll walk through the individual guitar tracks, the guitar buses, and show you what I'm doing to give you sort of an idea of what you could possibly do with your tracks. So why don't I stop overusing this 2-camera setup and let's jump into the mix, shall we? Trying to be fancy. Whatever. If you're into guitars, riffs, mixing, and everything in between, hit subscribe and follow along. So the first thing we're going to go over is my 2-bus, my master bus, my top-down mixing chain. The first thing I start with when I'm in mixing mode. All right? So the first thing I have is virtual mix rack, and I'm not going to go over all the nitty-gritty of the settings, but basically what I'm doing is I'm boosting a little bit of upper mids, boosting a little bit of low end, and driving the signal a bit. And then with the custom series EQ, I'm boosting some top end. And then this is just a trimmer plug-in to bring the overall level of everything down in case I'm going a little bit hot into the 2-bus, the master bus. Then I have the VBC FG Gray I'm using as a compressor to glue everything together. And if I play a piece, you'll see that it's basically just kind of catching the snare about 3, maybe 4 dB in certain spots, and kind of just ducking. Well, I guess it's basically just ducking the snare down perceptively to kind of fit into the mix a little bit better. I'll show you what I mean. So yeah, it's not doing a ton of heavy lifting. And then we have the virtual tape machine just for some overall vibe and saturation. Then I'm using this, although it doesn't like being brought up on my 4K monitor for one reason or another. There's things happening here, I promise. You can see what the tape machine is adding for, vibe. I'm boosting a little bit of low end, but also rolling off some of the super low subs, a little bit of sparkle in the high end. And then we are running into the Fab Pro L2. And let's see what that's doing. So just bringing up my levels and again catching that snare. So when I begin my mix process, that's what I'm doing. I'm mixing into that. So that's where we're beginning. All right, so you can see that we have a lot of layering happening here. So let's go over these main guitars right here. Now there's a few things that I'm doing here that I don't typically or normally do. And that is, I recorded these guitars in stereo because I have stereo delay and reverb from the Helix patch. And you can see I not only have it double tracked, but I have one guitar going down the center. In addition to, in various places, additional layering and melody happening. So let's listen to this. Cool. So what the hell are we doing here? Why don't we listen to one stereo guitar by itself? So if you're listening on anything worth a damn, you can hear that there's delay and reverb back there, giving it some space, some vibe, some ambience. So that's basically all over all of these guitars. And I have this pan to the left. If I were to bring it to the center, it's on all of them. That's why they're stereo. But I still have one pan to the left, one pan to the right. Now, on the bus, we'll start there. I'm just rolling off some low end and catching some of those palm mutes. Just so it doesn't get out of hand. Let's listen to it. Without. So there's a little bit too much rumble, too much woofiness, boominess without this EQ. So it's serving its purpose. It's subtle, but noticeable. Now on each of these tracks, I believe I'm doing the same thing. I have an EQ and then Pro MB catching the palm mutes again. Yeah, same EQ and multi-band compressor on each of them. So we'll just use this as an example. This is with the EQ. So what I'm doing is I'm rolling off a lot of that high-end sizzle that, you know, isn't really adding to the tone of the guitar. It's just kind of washy noise, if you will. And you can see I'm doing a little bit of notching. Again, subtle moves, but you can hear when I take out the notches, there's something happening, and then when you take it away, it sort of kind of cleans it up. And then Pro MB is catching the palm mutes again. And you can see that it's ducking by maybe 3 dB. And that's just to control all the buildup from happening, because if you have multiple layers of guitars and you have those palm mutes building up, it's going to get out of hand quick. So, and then I have that on the left, the right, and the center. And then again, just that little bit of EQ and a little additional reining in of the palm mutes. That's all I'm doing for these main guitars. On this bus, so you can see I'm basically doing the same thing. I don't have those notches in here because I must not have heard them, or I just forgot to sweep for them. Sometimes that happens. You know, my mixes are a live thing. They're like organic and they're happening a lot of the times as I'm composing towards the end of the final composition coming together. So sometimes I miss things, and this might have just been an oversight on my end, but again, it's the same thing, Pro EQ, rolling off high end, rolling off low end, controlling everything, and I just don't have the notches there. And then on the bus, same thing, I'm rolling off some Paul Mutes low end stuff. There's not a ton of palm mutes for this because, you know, it's kind of a single note type of melody type thing. And because it's kind of a vibey melody, it's, you know, it's definitely the melody of this particular part. I'm sending the bus to a analog delay with a ping pong delay and to some reverb, just to give it a little extra something, something. It's subtle, but in the context of the mix, it sounds good. Let's listen to everything here. So you can see there's a crap load of guitars. I have those the main guitars again, a left, right, and a center. And then we're gonna have some reinforcement and some ambience. So for this guitar, let's see what we're doing. So it's a high octave sort of reinforcement of the main melody. And what I'd like to do oftentimes with stuff that isn't the main piece, but it's sort of reinforcement or some additional ambience, is I'll roll off more high end and more low end and give it sort of a low-fi or lower fi sound than the rest. So let's listen to this guitar centered, and you can see what I mean. Sorry, I had the delay on. So let's give this a listen. Layering, ambience. It doesn't need to be as high fidelity as the rest of it. I don't want to draw too much attention to it, but you can hear that it's back there, you know? And then I'm obviously drenching it in, we got ping pong delay here, quarter note, and then another delay here, and reverb here on the bus. So I'm drenching this in vibe, if you will. So there's that. And then what else do I have here? All right, so this is also some reinforcement. It's sort of like the secondary riff, if you will. Man, there's a lot happening. So what do I have going on here? Mix-wise, again, I'm using this sort of lo-fi EQ thing happening. I'm sending it to the quarter note ping pong delay, and then to some reverb. And that's all we're doing for this particular thing. So it's mainly just controlling the high and the low end here. This is a little bit of a woofy spot, and then giving it vibe. Use a different word, bro. Giving it that space, you know? So if we put all those pieces together, so I think you guys can tell if I didn't have these multi-band compressors choking those palm mutes a little bit, it would get way out of hand. Now, luckily, these parts, these other additional layering parts, you know, they don't have a ton of that low end information anyways, because I'm cutting up to 175 hertz, you know, so if we listen to this, so I'm cutting a lot of that palm mute out anyway. It's not needed for this particular part. So, you know, it's kind of this real, like, you want to keep the body of the guitar, but you also want to control the low end because it can get out of hand. Let's listen to this in its entirety. Cool. And so this next section is, I guess, would technically be the heaviest part of the song, meaning the heaviest sounding riff, I guess, not necessarily layering wise, because you can see it's the most sparse layering wise. It's just double tracked guitars with the center guitar. And I do have the center guitar down 2 dB, and I believe that's the case in every scenario where there's a left, a right, and a center. The center guitar is always down a couple dB. So this is this part. What are we doing? More EQ, high and a low cut. I didn't feel like I needed those notches here. So cool. Same thing here. Yep. High and a low cut. Multi-band compressor. Controlling the palm mutes. Now, I've seen other people do it a little bit differently with different settings. For me, and because this is heavier music, oftentimes a lot quicker, I have the attack and the release as fast as possible. The threshold is going to vary depending on, you know, your input, and the ratio I have at 4. So, and you can see it's at most cutting 4 or 5 dB. Less than that, 3 dB at the most. So again, we're just controlling things. We're controlling, you know, the low end. You want to control it because the bass and the kick and everything else down there is going to be occupying that space. So let's take a look at what I'm doing for some of the kind of in-between pieces, some of those little riffs that bridge a riff to a riff. Let me show you what I mean. We have the end of one section, basically a bridge type of riff, and then the next section. Okay, sorry, I like that part. This part is going to be simple. So I have basically like a chunk of the upcoming riff, just bridging the two. So what do we have going on? Mega drastic EQ happening. It's basically the main guitar tone. I just rolled so much off, you know, because it's going to be impactful for the next part, you know. It draws you in, it kind of gets quiet, and then all of a sudden the full range, full-fledged sound of the guitar comes in. And I also have that going to a ping pong delay, and to, yes, my second monitor used to be on the right side, so going to a reverb. Oops. And I have that here as well. And the intro. Cool. And that's as simple as that. Now this next part leads into another section where there's a lot of layers. So we have the main guitars here. Again, if you can take a look, I have some thread lines happening. So we've already gone over what's going on with these guitars effects-wise earlier in the song. Same thing's happening here. This is a different section, but there's going to be some similar stuff. We'll go over this next. So here's the main part of this particular part. You can hear that it's not the tightest thing in the world. I probably could have gone back and recorded whichever one of those guitars is falling out of time just a little bit. But I'm a human, and I don't time correct guitars. I don't do it. I don't. I will get it as tight as possible. That is not as tight as possible. I'm sure I, at this point, was just like happy that I came up with this section and maybe just overlooked it again. And in the context of the mix, everything sounded good, and I'm fine with that. you know, you guys are only going to hear this isolated when I show you. So there's that part, and then there's this next section. Nothing on the bus for these two, but we are doing some EQ that I wish would just... because of the type of riff, I ended up doing some more notching than usual. So let's listen to this. Let me center it. So it's controlling a lot of really annoying high-end frequencies because of where I'm playing. I'm playing high up on the neck and, you know, on the top strings. So it was getting out of hand. Let's see what those were doing. So if I highlight all of them, there's something I could have definitely controlled if I wrote, not if I wrote, if I created a specific tone for this particular part. If I knew it was going to be a lo-fi kind of thing, if I knew it was going to be some backing up type of piece, I would have fixed this in the Helix tone. But because I used the same guitar tone throughout, this is what I had to do. And this is sort of a little bit of this is a little extreme, but it's also kind of points to saving yourself some time and energy getting it right at the source. But you know, I was inspired, so I rolled with it. Let's pan this back to the left. And again, both of these guitars are the same, and there's nothing on the bus. What do I have going on down here? This is some fun stuff. You know, creepy stuff. And these are both going down the center. They're tucked into the mix. These windows are off the screen again. And again, I'm doing that kind of lo-fi thing where I'm just rolling off a bunch of highs, rolling off some lows. And then I'm using the stock compressor and just kind of, you know, flattening it a little bit. Let's listen to it without the EQ. Again, this is like background stuff. This is ambient stuff. This is not the main point. I'm trying to, like, you know, with camera angles, you're often trying to draw the viewer's eyes into something. I'm basically trying to draw your ears into the important parts, but there's some ear candy happening as well. So let's listen to this section. And both of these are treated the same. These are just, you know, reinforcement type stuff. Let's listen to this whole section. Now this background stuff I do have going to ping pong delay and reverb. Next part. is, again, the same main guitar section that we've gone over already. Not the cleanest cut and paste there. Yes, I could have played that part all the way through, but I was going with the flow. I just copied and pasted it, and I just ended up never going back and playing this section all in one piece. And yeah, sometimes time is of the essence. I set myself a goal to get this track out before the end of the year, to have X number of tracks out in 2020. So that's what I did. That's the main section part. Then I have some ambience happening. Oh yeah, so this was sort of the secondary riff, which is why it's very loud. Now you're gonna hear that this was played with the split coil on my Solar guitar, my Solar Artist A1.6, the 25.5-inch scale, black one. This was, I believe, the split coil on the neck, and kind of gives it that twangy sort of sound. And it's pretty loud in the mix, but it's sort of the uplifting part of this section. And again, I'm doing just some high and low. Let's listen to what it's doing. Oh, I don't have a center one there. I just have a left and right, my bad. Here we go. Let's center this one. And then Pro MB, catching the palm mutes, but there's not really any there. This is the section I think I use for the heavier part. So you can see it's not really doing anything. Pan that back to the left. Then I have this happening here. Just more reinforcement to that kind of melody here. We've gone over this already as well. This is on a track previously gone over. Just that you know, kind of rolling off extra, a little bit more high end, a little bit more low end, just to not draw too much attention to it. And what else? I think that's it for this section. This is a pretty cool section. Okay, the solo. Now you're going to see, you can clearly see that the main part of the solo that's not the harmony is in two sections. That's for two reasons. One, trying to come up with a solo for me is hard. I'm not that great. I'm not, but I'm forcing myself to solo in my songs now, because I like pushing myself. That being said, I'm not a super great guitar player, and you can tell, especially when I try to solo. And coming up with solos, I just find it easier to kind of do it in chunks, to come up with a section, and then if I like a section, I'll build off of that. That's what happened here. And I did do some takes of the whole thing you know, in one take, but these two pieces sounded the best, so that's what I went with. And you can see I just crossfaded them together. So we can listen to what I did here. On the individual track, let me turn off this stuff. Turn off the bus. So this is just the raw solo guitar. You can hear I'm struggling there, and you can hear that bad fade. In the context of the mix, you can't really tell, but it was a long night of me trying to come up with a cool part, and I was, you know, I don't care how good you think it is or whatnot. I was pretty proud of this part. So after a long night of trying to come up with something and feeling good about the composition, I left this take, and that's what ended up in the final track. Here's the harmony. I'll play it with the harmony, and then I'll solo the harmony. Not my best playing, and you can hear I am pushing it. So both of those are going to, again, a plugin that's off the screen, because this isn't a typical behavior of Studio One, all right? It's because I had my second monitor, that one, over on the right, and that's where they were. So, chill. Ping pong delay, even more delay than the solo tone already had. Drench it in delay. The Verb Suite Classics, again, more reverb. Probably should have prepped this so these windows weren't falling off. Some compression. Just to bring all my notes together, and then EQ. I'm kind of rolling off some high end, some low end on this EQ. That's just how I thought it sounded good in the mix. And on the bus, we have more windows that are off the screen. Fun stuff, dude. Oh yeah, I'm rolling off way more high end and low end. So the virtual tape machine is kind of adding a little bit of almost gain, but it's like some dirt back into it. Cool, man. Sometimes I do different stuff, and that's a little surprising. I don't usually do that, but it worked out good, I think. So that's the solo. Let's listen to it in the mix again. It probably could have been a little bit louder in the mix, but again, I'm not super confident with my skills, and you can hear it there. You know, that's pretty revealing, if you ask me, and you can kind of hear how amateur of a guitar player I am, but I'm trying, you know, and that's all you can do. And then the rest of this stuff is all tracks we've heard. These are all tracks and sections we've heard. The main important keys are controlling your low end, something I talk about in all my guitar mixing videos, or all my mixing videos in general. Multi-band compressor to control the palm mutes is always super helpful, and I put it on just about every track that has some palm muting going on. I'll put it on the individual tracks, and I'll put it on the bus, as you can see. And then rolling off high and rolling off low end to kind of make it's an old trick a lot of producers will do on like background vocals. They'll roll off a lot of the high and low end and give it sort of a more of a lo-fi feel compared to the main guitars, so as to emphasize that, hey, there's other guitars going on there, there's some layering, there's some reinforcement, there's some melodies back there, but it's not the main attraction, you know? And that's what I'm doing on a lot of these guitars, you know, rolling off more low end and high end than I typically would. And I did that all over this track because I felt like it fit. So I know a lot of you guys are going to ask, so why don't we go over the bass as well? Now again, this track is a little bit different than some of my other tracks. There's a lot of space, it's not as fast, aggressive, and I did some different things. I tried some different things, and I did that on the bass as well. So if we take a look at what I did, I got some EQ. Well, let's turn all this off and listen to the raw bass tone. This was probably a good part. So that's the raw tone out of the Helix, my metal bass tone that is in preset pack number 2. It's the same tone you guys can get. And I'm doing a little bit to it to kind of control how it fits into this mix. I didn't want it as in the forefront as I usually do. I wanted more low end and body. So these moves sort of kind of get me in that direction. Let's add the EQ in. So I'm doing something a little bit different here. The nice thing about Pro Q3 is there is, you can add compression, or you can add some, it's a dynamic EQ. So you can add compression in the EQ in certain frequencies. So what I'm doing here is, this is a shelf, and I'm compressing everything above 8900, above 8K basically. So when it gets to a threshold, it ducks it, just to kind of control the high end of the bass. So you can see when it's playing, it's initially controlling that high end just so it doesn't poke out and F with everything else, the guitars and stuff. I wanted more of a round sound here. I typically am fine with that kind of high end and that crispiness in the bass. It's aggressive, but we didn't need that aggression here. So I'm controlling it. I didn't get rid of it, I'm controlling it. I didn't like this fartiness here, so that's why that's there. It's basically the main note throughout this track that I kind of boosted a little bit. And yeah, I'm rolling off low end too on my bass. Super duper subs, super low subs that can get way out of hand. I can hear it in my headphones. If you're listening on something decent, you can hear what got cut, but it's basically just going to muddy up a mix, in my opinion. Now, I kind of contradicted myself later on down this chain, and I'll show you what I mean. Then we're going into the virtual mix rack, and I'm using the FG stress to kind of squeeze and compress it a little bit. So it's subtle. It's just kind of like leveling things off. Then I'm going to R bass. I've never done this before on any bass before, and I'm just adding in some low end harmonics at about 80 hertz. Now, if we look back here, I'm cutting at 41, so it's not, so it's right around here. I'm boosting. Instead of boosting in this EQ, I added this, and it's subtle, but it worked in this mix. I wouldn't usually do that. I've never done that on bass before, but with this type of open, vibey track, there's that word again, I used it, and it worked out. And something else I use on all my bass tracks is L1, just to really flatten it out, make all my playing as level as possible. So you can see it's almost always doing something, even if it's just a little bit, because I want to really make everything even throughout the duration of the track. Here's a good part to listen to. You know, I kind of cleaned those, did some you know, little trickery there to make it sound super tight, cutting out those gaps. Kind of add some emphasis to those parts. I was doing it anyway, but with my noisy bass, you can hear like hiss and stuff. Like if we bring this back in, bring this back in. So why not make it clean and produced? So that's it. That's what I did with the bass. And that's what I did with all of these guitars. So I know that this video is going to be super long. I know there's a lot of information. I hope I didn't gloss over anything. I hope you guys find some cool inspiration here. And again, a lot of these things I don't always do on my typical metal productions, but because of the type of riffs, the space that was kind of allotted is a little bit more open. A lot of ambience. So I tried some different things here, things I wouldn't typically do. And I would encourage you to kind of do the same. If you kind of have a particular riff that's sounding a little bit outside of your normal box, go with it, run with it, see how it inspires you. And you never know what what you're gonna end up making. This, to date, for me, is one of the tracks I'm most proud of. And a lot of people probably wouldn't think that if they listen to the rest of my music, but I think this is the best sounding thing I've ever recorded, quite honestly. in the context of what it is, you know? Maybe not technically, but overall, mix-wise, composition. I'm really, really proud of this track. It's called Humanity. It is available on Bandcamp for sale and streaming everywhere. So if you dig it, I'd love it if you gave it a listen, a stream, whatever you have you. So I hope you guys dig this. All relating information and links can be found in the description down below. And if you found this video helpful, hit subscribe and stay up to date. All right, I'm sure I already said this, but I know this has been a long video. I hope you guys find some inspiration from it. I hope you found it helpful. I hope it'll kind of give you some ideas on potential things that you can do to enhance your tracks. Layer your guitars up. Who cares, man? Maybe you need 3 guitar players to play it live, but you know, this is sort of like a canvas when you're recording, and you can do whatever you want, do whatever inspires you. I like to layer guitars. Some people don't. It's all up to you. Be creative, and this was definitely one of my more creative tracks, and I had so much fun, and I feel like to date it is one of the best things I've ever recorded. I know I said that already, but I hope you guys find some use from some of these techniques, some of the things that I did, and again, some of the things that I did differently from that are a little bit of a departure from what I usually do. Like I mentioned before, I wanted to kind of set out this year to be as helpful to you guys as possible. Put out content that, yeah, probably and maybe won't do as well, numbers-wise, views-wise, but will end up being more helpful to you guys, musicians and creatives, in your journey to making your music, and that's what I want to do. So I know I've gone over a lot of these topics, subjects before. As a matter of fact, I know I've shown many of these techniques before. It's a little more streamlined now, and what it does do is reinforce my principles behind kind of how I go about mixing guitars. I'm not a professional, I'm not an expert, I don't claim to be. This is just the way I do it, and I want to share it with you, and hopefully it'll inspire you and help you. And that was the goal. That's what I set out to do this year. So thanks to you guys who ask for this type of stuff, because I think it is good to maybe do like at least a yearly refresher on this type of thing. So this is for you guys. This is for all of you guys who've been asking. Thank you guys so much for being here. I hope you're all doing well, staying safe, and you know, dealing with everything that's going on in the world as best as you possibly can. Things are kind of weighing on me, as a matter of fact, if I'm going to be totally blunt and honest. And that's part of something that I want to do this year as well, is be a little more candid and kind of show you like the real me. Last year, I was rolling with the punches just like a lot of you guys were. My family was affected in more ways than one with, you know, everything that's been going on in the world. And for the most part, I was optimistic and strong and kind of like leading the way. But in recent weeks and months, I would say definitely recent weeks and the last month or so, I'm finally starting to crumble a little bit and losing my my motivation, but I'm not gonna let it bring me down. I know we will all see brighter days. I'm optimistic. I feel like there's more good in the world than bad. And I'm gonna stick to that feeling, because it's really the only thing we have. I know that's a little deep, a little sappy, so forgive me. But thank you guys so much for being here, spending your time, hopefully taking your mind off of everything, and leading you into a creative direction. Special shout out to those of you following me over on Patreon and supporting me, those of you who are willing to part with a few shekels every month. I really do appreciate it. I owe you guys a Helix tone. I know, I didn't forget about you. And of course, those of you who support me over here on YouTube as members. All of my subscribers are important to me, and your support really does mean everything. And we're building a really good, positive community here. And it's been one of the highlights of the last couple of years, is getting to know a lot of you, hanging out with so many of you on the live streams more and more. Me and Bunn are having a great time really building this community with you in mind. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of you guys. If you're looking for other ways to support me, the channel, and what I'm doing here, I of course have my music for sale. This track, Humanity, as well as all my other work on Bandcamp and streaming everywhere music is streamed. I do have merch for sale, limited right now, but we have more things in the works. So I have merch for sale, links in the description below. New project coming up, new projects for this year. I'm excited. I am really excited on that front of things. I'm excited to share new music with you, different styles, different genres, different projects, collaborations. Wednesdays are for Bandless, the show The Bun and I do about the behind the scenes, the solo artist journey in this creative space as a YouTuber, as a musician. We dive into everything, behind the scenes, philosophical, mental, everything that goes into being a creative person, a musician, a YouTuber, whatever. We lift the veil on that, and that's our show, Bandless, on Wednesdays. Right now it's on my channel. It's live, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. If that's something that interests you, we'd really love to have you on board. It's a live show, and it's been great. We've done 2 now, I believe. 1? Maybe 2. 1 or 2, I'm sorry, I forget. We're also exploring the idea of a collective community Discord between the Bun and I. So again, that's Bandless, Wednesday evenings, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time with me, Nick Hill, and Scott the Bun. I hope you guys can make it. In addition to that, Bun does his live streams on Fridays, and I do my live streams on Saturday nights. And you guys are great. I love Saturday nights so much. It is such a blast. Such a good time virtually hanging out with everybody. I work on music, I answer Helix questions, productions questions, we go over music, all sorts of things. We get into it. It's fun, good, quality time to get your mind off of everything and just hang out with some like-minded people in a positive environment too. So if you want to be in a group of positive dudes hanging out, I just say dudes because there hasn't been any chicks yet, but they're more than welcome to show up. It's just something to lift our spirits, and it's been a good time. It's been that for me. So that's Saturday nights. The Buns is Friday nights. Wednesdays is Bandless. And that's it, guys. I'm rambling at this point. Thank you so much. I know this video was long. I hope it was helpful. We'll see you in the next one.